Now, this morning's talking point: should catcalling at women and sexist abuse in public be made hate crimes? The Labour MP, Melanie Onn, has said it should and has called for a pilot scheme in Nottinghamshire to be made law across the country. Well, here to discuss this, we have feminist and writer for The Telegraph and Metro, Rebecca Manning-Reid, and columnist for Spiked, Naomi First. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Now, this is an interesting one. Rebecca, let's get your point of view first. Is this a bit heavy-handed? When people say catcalling, they think of wolf whistling.
So I think it depends on what kind of catcalling we're talking about. Yes, of course, a little tiny wolf whistle as you walk past probably isn't intimidating. However, first time it ever happened to me, I was 12, I was wearing a vest top, and a man is 30 shouted a comment about my chest. And that's a pretty distressing thing to have happen. So there's a spectrum. I think when we talk about whether or not it's a hate crime, we need to compare it to the other things that are considered hate crimes. And if you shouted a racial slur at somebody in the street, that would be considered a hate crime. You'd be shouting that because A, you're a racist, and B, you are working on the basis of that person's skin colour. I don't think that shouting something at somebody because of their gender is any different from shouting something at somebody because of their skin colour. That's an interesting point, Naomi. Should shouting something at somebody because they are a woman be the same as shouting at somebody just because they are black, for example?
No, I don't. I think we're talking about different things here because, first of all, we're calling it a misogynist hate crime.
Misogynist act.
Or a misogynist act. Yeah. Misogyny means you hate all women. I think if a man wolf whistles at a woman, it doesn't mean that he hates all women. I think the idea of making catcalling...
You could feel intimidated or threatened. It depends what the scenario is. If it's a sing-song whistle, some women might not be offended and therefore choose not to report it. If it's in the dead of night and it's a man on the other side of the road that wolf whistles, you would immediately feel vulnerable.
I think, like you said, it depends on the situation, but it's important not to conflate different things. Things like sexual assault, harassment, stalking, these are already crimes. We have legislation for these. What the MP was talking about, she talked about catcalling, she talked about unwelcome come-ons, which is essentially unwelcome conversation. And I think we need to be very careful about making unwelcome conversation a crime that's very damaging for free speech. And it also sends out quite an insulting message about women that they're not able to cope with unwelcome conversation in the public sphere, and that's not true. And I don't think that involving police is the answer for something. Whilst I completely understand that sometimes, you know, a wolf whistle or catcalling or a man talking to you when you've made it clear you don't want to be talked to, it can be a little bit intimidating, it can be irritating, but what we're talking about is bad behaviour, which is not criminal behaviour, and I think it's really important to make the distinction.
Okay. In the first 8 months of this scheme in Nottinghamshire, 79 misogynistic acts were recorded, 31 of them were categorised as hate crimes. It's interesting, Rebecca, we've had quite a lot of response to this on Twitter. I'll just read you a few out. One from Darth, who said, should we ban all human interaction? Don't the police have enough to deal with? Never mind catching people who are catcalling. Sharon says, do we not have better things to spend our time on? I was always quite chuffed when a wolf whistle was aimed at me. I suppose nowadays you're only allowed to interact online as opposed to in person. A lot of people will say this is a lot of fuss over nothing.
I mean, it's the standard knee-jerk responses. We can't do anything. Political correctness gone mad. They're trying to ruin dating. They're trying to stop people from ever being able to have human interaction. I don't think that's the case. What we're trying to do is create a situation in which, and I've been in this situation, every woman I know has been in this situation, you're walking down the street and somebody's following you saying, give me your number, give me your number, give me your number, where you end up having to give a fake number, and then they call your fake number, and then they get angry that it's a fake number. Now, that's not a nice situation for women to be in. And all I'm saying is, could we not change things? Could we not live in a world where women don't have to lie to protect themselves because men can't take no for an answer? And if men want to stop doing it without it being made a hate crime, that's fantastic.
It's when it feels that your safety is compromising. Like you said, we all have a story about something like that. I have a story where I was in the back of a taxi and the driver was talking to me in innuendos. And everything I said, he found a way of turning it into something that made me really uncomfortable, to the point where I asked him to stop the taxi, paid the fare and just got out. Now, in that instance, where would I have gone to report that man? Could I have gone to the police? Because now you can report something like that under a misogynistic act. I might have done, because I'd have thought, actually, what if another woman got in that taxi and he was doing that to her?
And is that the tip of the iceberg as well? Is that the limit of what he does, or is that just the beginning of what he does?
Naomi, what do you think?
See, I don't like that. People often say it's the tip of the iceberg, and they act as if there's behaviour that's on a spectrum, that if a man wolf whistles, it's on a spectrum that eventually leads to rape, and that's false, and that's essentially accusing a lot of innocent men.
But there should be a place for women can tell the difference. Women aren't stupid. They can tell the difference between something that's harmless and something that's loaded with something a little bit more sinister. And in that instance, again, where do they go?
I think, like, if you feel that your safety is being compromised, then of course, you need to get in touch with the police. But
what does it get reported as? How do they take it seriously? How do they write it up?
I think it's more a case of if you felt your safety was really under threat at that precise moment. It's about getting help at that precise moment. What the MP Melanie Onn was saying was she was talking about catcalling, and that's the problem, is where do you draw the line? If you actually say the definition of a hate crime now includes catcalling, includes an unwelcome come-on, then if a 16-year-old boy wolf whistles at a girl, technically she could report it, he could get maybe arrested, maybe fined. Do we really want that to be happening? That's a very dangerous situation to be in.
But we still have the police, we still have a governing body. Just because it's reported doesn't mean that it will be convicted, doesn't mean that it will actually affect them. If you're 16 and you wolf whistle and somebody rings up,
if you get reported to the police as a 16-year-old, that is going to affect your life. That's really, and it shouldn't happen for something that if like a one-off wolf whistle, someone chats you up. Also, how does a man know if the chat up's unwelcome?
You have to trust the police to investigate it properly and differentiate between what is not malicious and something that is. We're going to have to leave it there. That is our talking point this morning. Should catcalling be labelled as a hate crime, a misogynist act even? Thank you both, ladies. It's very interesting.